Ready to go?
Let's do it.
All right. Welcome everybody to session 2 of our NextGen Healthcare Summit, revealing the secret revenue streams of pharmacy benefit managers and how to eliminate these from your plan. My name is Ricky Hankart. I am a benefits advisor here at Connor Insurance and will be your host today. We are going to be talking to Trevor Dare from Granite Peak Analytics, and I think you're really going to enjoy what he has to share with us today. We have a few housekeeping items to go over while people are still rolling in. So if you could please mute your microphones, make sure that's already done just to minimize some background noise. And if there are any questions throughout today's conversation, please submit those through the Q&A box at the bottom, and you'll see that pop up versus the chat or anything like that. We'll answer those questions at the end of today's session. People still coming in. Good. All right. So while we are letting people join here, I just want to say a quick, thank you to our sponsors. We have 2 title sponsors today. On this session, we have TrueRx Health Strategists. They are a pharmacy benefit manager, and Wellbridge Surgical. And then at the advocate level for sponsorship, we have Unified Group Services, Granite Peak Analytics, RX Help Centers, Stealth Partner Group, Green Imaging, and TPAC. Perfect. So before we get going and talking to Trevor, I do want to just mention TrueRx again, our title sponsor, and introduce you to Eric Barker, who will give a brief overview of their services. They're a very great partner that we have worked with that many of our customers have really enjoyed, and so I think you'll love to hear more about them. Eric?
Okay. Thank you, Ricky, and we appreciate the opportunity to sponsor this great series. It's not every day you get a chance to learn from so many experts in the field and hold so much. And learn so much. It's been one of the reasons we've really enjoyed our partnership with Connor Insurance as well. At TrueRx, we're a pharmacy benefit manager who's been around since 2007, currently servicing nearly 1,000 clients across the country. Our approach really is to help our clients take healthcare spending into a healthcare investment. We do that with a patient-based clinical approach. We have our pharmacogenomics program, for instance, is so well respected in our industry that we were asked to present at a conference to our peers last year on that. And so from our standpoint, we always believe medications offer the best investment in your health. I mean, a $4 blood pressure medication can ultimately prevent a stroke or a heart attack. So let's make sure that that works properly. Let's make sure that we're staying patient focused and making sure that our clients are well taken care of on the client services and implementation side as well. I don't want to steal any of Trevor's thunder. I've known Trevor for a really long time, and he is a great presenter, and you will all have a lot of enjoyment listening to him, and you'll learn a lot. But I think one of the business model that allows us to stay so clinically focused is that TrueRx is a true pass-through model. So we don't keep rebates. As soon as a PBM starts keeping rebates, I can guarantee you Pfizer pays a hawk of a lot more money than you do. No questions asked. And whoever pays the most is who your boss is. And so we don't want to work for Pfizer. We want to work for you. We want to work for our partners like Granite Peak Analytics and Connor Insurance. So not keeping rebates is a really important part of our business model, not spreading. So whatever we pay the pharmacy is what you pay us. And then offering a host of solutions, whether those are around specialty medications, HCPCS codes like J codes, Q codes, C codes, R codes, any of those, clinical programs. You've probably heard of Ozempic. You may have heard of Mounjaro. These are diabetes drugs that will soon have indications for weight loss. It's going to be a tough situation to handle for the next couple of years. Lots of cost, billions of dollars in annual sales across the world. So you're going to need an expert to help you understand those. And at SureX, we're here to help you with that. So again, I appreciate the opportunity to offer some sponsorship here. You guys are in for a treat today. I'm going to kind of step out and come back in as a normal attendee if I can figure out how to do that so that Trevor can have the stage. But Deanna, Ricky, and Ben behind the scenes, thank you very much for the opportunity to join you and sponsor you today.
Thanks, Eric. All right. We are going to do a quick poll question here first. So before you join this meeting, this webinar, did you know pharmacy costs are one of the easiest items to tackle when managing healthcare costs? So we give people a minute to answer that. I'm just going to introduce you to Trevor Dare. He has spent almost a decade working with clients and brokers across the US at a leading third-party administrator before eventually founding Granite Peak Analytics in 2019. He spent 4 years as the director of prescription services, helping clients negotiate transparent and cost-effective PBM solutions. His experience in the health plan space provides a holistic view of pharmacy benefits, eliminating traditional silos that may reduce prescription costs, but increase medical spending. Trevor also brings employers unique and cost-effective benefit solutions as a licensed insurance producer and benefits consultant. So with that, turn it over to you, Trevor. Whenever you are ready, we'll wait for this poll to end here. All right.
Awesome. Well, I'm ready to go. So Ricky or Deanna, are you pulling up the deck, or would you like me to? There we go. Deanna, thank you. So I think thank you to the Connor team for having me on. Thank you all for taking some time out of your day to listen to, what isn't always the most exciting thing to talk about, which is prescription benefits. I think I'm going to take a quick step back just to talk about what got me into this business, what got me into this industry, and why we're so passionate about fixing it. When I worked for a third-party administrator, we really were working with some PBM partners that now kind of make up 80% of the entire market across the US. And what happened with one of those partners, which was kind of the spark that lit my fire to really start doing something about this, is there was a formulary change. And I'm sure all of you on the phone are familiar with formulary changes, whether as a patient or a plan. And usually you'll get a letter that says, hey, this is non-preferred, this is preferred, you need to switch. And that's what we were dealing with. We were kind of the hub for all of our clients. And it was an inhaler. And there was no change in the clinical effectiveness of the inhaler. There was no real meaningful difference. We also happened to have a cost plus pharmacy. So when that notification came out, it came out in this wonderfully marketed, hey, we review for clinical appropriateness, cost effectiveness, all these things, right? Where you're like, oh, they're really doing this on our behalf. And I called up our pharmacist and said, what does the new one cost? And it was like $30, $40 more than the current one. I'm like, well, that doesn't make any sense. Why would they prefer something that is more expensive for our patients and our clients? So I went back to the PBM and said, this doesn't make sense. This is a more expensive medication and it's not better clinically. And eventually, after continuing to ask the annoying question, they finally said, well, it gets a better rebate. So to Eric's introduction, I kind of had a light bulb go on and I thought, okay, well, it's higher cost, it gets a better rebate, but our clients and the patients don't see that rebate. They don't get the additional rebate. So the only reason that formulary change was made was because it was in the financial best interest of the PBM. And that not only the misleading messaging, but the fact that there was really, they weren't really working on our clients' behalf. They were working on their own behalf. And I think that surprises a lot of people. I always say, and it's surprising to people, that we should not have a business. Prescription benefit managers should be working on behalf of their clients. And I use PBMs loosely. Usually when I'm talking about PBMs, an egregious tactic, it's the larger publicly traded ones that make up most of the market. So there are good PBMs. We think highly of TrueRx and their model, because they focus on, they work for our clients and our patients, and it's a different model and a different way of doing business. So that's what really got me into this. And eventually, the more I peeled back the layers, the more of those things I found that they weren't doing what was in the best interest of our clients. They weren't helping patients, actually. They were kind of doing it in this big facade that was driving a ton of profitability and revenue. So, which I'm not against profitability and revenue. We're all, business owners are part of a business, and we need to make money, but do it in the right way, and do it in a way that you're actually, helping people and not just trying to maximize profit. So with that little background, as I kind of moved through my career, it became evident that I was so passionate about it. I had to create a business, because I was really just yelling at the top of my lungs, like, this is wrong. This, this shouldn't happen. And a lot of people weren't listening. And I didn't have, a true data platform to show them what they were overpaying. So that's where Granite Peak Analytics was formed, where we take unbiased data. And by unbiased data, I mean data that is truly independent, not just data that your prescription benefit manager wants you to see to tell their story, along with our kind of expertise in consulting. And so that is what created our business. And now we're serving, self-insured employers, broker advisors like Connor across the country. And it's really what gets us up every day. 99.9% of people that we're helping, that the patient, as Eric talked about, in that making sure that prescription is an investment in their health, they have no idea we exist, and that's okay. We like to, work on their behalf and the plan's behalf to eliminate the prescription overspend that happens. And I don't call it savings, because it's not money you should have spent anyway. We're not saving you money. We're just eliminating the fat and the bulk and the over profitability that exists in the system. So with that, and you will be able to take these top 10 questions with you. I think the document's gonna be included in the chat, but we really came up with 10 questions that we thought were important for employers on the call to ask of their PBM. And what we find in the PBM world is you start talking about a lot of different numbers and savings, and candidly, it can all be this big facade to take your eye off the ball. And that ball is your prescription cost per member per month. So you might look at things from your advisor or from the PBM that shows, look, we got this huge savings off of average wholesale price, or we got massive rebates for you. Well, that's all well and good, but what you're actually spending is the most important. And we see all the time that rebates are going up and discounts are getting better, but what the employers and patients are writing a check for is continuing to increase at double-digit trend. So that's the first question, and it's a really easy way to evaluate, like, is my plan actually performing well? So that's the first question. What's my prescription cost per member per month? And if you're a self-insured employer and you're getting rebates, you'll want to, apply those rebates back and get kind of a net figure. If you're fully insured and you're not getting rebates at all, you're going to likely have a more inflated per member per month. But instead of kind of viewing things as savings and, getting caught up by big rebate checks, focus on what you're actually spending. So that's the first question. And then the second one is trend that over 3 years. So make sure that, understanding what your per member per month costs are today is important, but understanding what they were last year and the year before is equally as important, so you can identify a trend. Is it being managed? Are you getting the bang for your buck? So that goes into number 3, which is, if someone provided you projections on what your costs would be, it's amazing how many employers, it doesn't matter if you're 10 employees, or I talked to one that was 40,000 employees a few months ago. And I was like, have you went back and validated that those projections came true? And they were like, no, that's a good idea. So you get so busy, you get so, you're moving on to the next thing and trying to tackle all these challenges. We forget to measure backwards, right? Did what someone told me was going to happen actually occur? And if not, why? So those are key questions to be asking. The other thing we see in this business, which is a big pet peeve of mine, is a lot of money going to intermediaries, whether that be a PBM consultant like myself, whether that be a broker advisor, whether that be a reseller. There's all these hands in the pot. And very rarely is it transparent who's getting paid what and what they're doing for it. So that's a big question that I think is important as you're evaluating your plan. Who's getting paid what on my employees and my plan? It's prescriptions. Because once you start identifying that, you can go, why? Are they providing value, or are they just extracting profit from our program? One thing that Eric mentioned too, it passed through, and I don't want to get into PBM jargon, but one thing that we see in the industry is the majority of pharmacy benefit contracts are done on a spread basis. So you don't actually know how much money they're making. And when you don't know how much money a partner is making, whether it be your broker, your TPA, your insurance carrier, your PBM, or even an employee, right? I always try and tie this back to you hold your valued employees accountable. You look at what they're being paid and the job that they're doing, and you usually have some type of quarterly review to evaluate that and hold them accountable to what they're supposed to be doing, and hopefully elevate them to continue doing a great job. We don't do that in PBM world, right? We're like, a lot of folks will execute a 3-year PBM contract, have no idea the amount of money they're making. And when you don't know how much someone is making, especially a partner, how do you hold them accountable and say, well, you got paid $1 million. My prescription spend went up 2 million. Did you really do your job? And we just assume people are doing their job, right? And it happens more and more in healthcare. And it's unfortunate, again, that in the general PBM space, this just isn't the case. I think we have another poll question coming up.
You want me to launch it?
Launch away. Unless I jumped the gun there on the poll question. There we go.
All right. Have you validated that your pharmacy benefit manager is performing according to your contract?
You have just about 30 seconds to allow people to respond, and then I'll get back into it. And please, if you have any questions about some of the content that I'm covering, please put them in the Q&A. We will have time at the end to chat about those. I really don't want this to be a situation where I'm talking at you for 30 minutes and then, hey, have a great day. Like, we want engagement. We want you to really have some great ideas and thoughts around what can you do, and maybe how the Connor team can help you.
All right. Just so everybody knows the results here. So 30% of you have validated that your pharmacy benefit manager is performing according to your contract, and 70% of you have not.
Yep. And that's very common. That's not uncommon. And there's a reason for that. It's because we trust, right? We trust that the partners that we've contracted with are doing what they're supposed to do. And there's a slide coming up once we get through this that'll show you that that's just not always the case. And we say 9 times out of 10, what's been contracted is not actually what's happening on the claims side. And this is a game that gets played throughout the industry. So what we do in our job, and part of our role in the ecosystem, is to hold that PBM accountable. Number one, to negotiate a contract that's not one-sided. And number two, once we get a strong contract, then enforce it. And I think I can't say this enough. Like, we shouldn't have to do that. We shouldn't have to exist. But we do, because of these situations in the ecosystem that we find over and over again. So, and that leads to kind of the sixth question, which is, have you reconciled your contract independently? Some folks or some employers or some advisors will have the PBM reconcile their own guarantees. And that's all well and good, but that's kind of like auditing yourself, right? Not having an independent auditor come in and say, here are the things that are going wrong. There's a lot of games that can be played on that side too. So that's where we come in and do an independent assessment of the pharmacy program. Big one, usually when you ask this question, you will identify that there are not just 1, 2, or 3, but more conflicts of interest in your prescription plan. Conflicts of interest that we're typically talking about are like the ownership of certain pharmacies. So we see it a lot in the, there's one very large PBM that owns 15,000 retail pharmacies. So if you think about the core job of a PBM, is to negotiate pricing with the pharmacies and make sure that reimbursements are fair. And if your PBM owns 15,000 pharmacies, do you think they're negotiating really heavily with themselves? Not usually, right? That's what we call a big conflict of interest, where you can't just trust them, right? That doesn't exist. Trust, I always say trust but verify, or don't trust and verify when it comes to prescriptions. One thing that's really important today that is probably the biggest risk for any health plan, whether you're fully insured, self-insured, is specialty pharmacy. Specialty pharmacy is, it used to make up 10 to 20% of total prescription spend. And specialty drugs, the most common one is like Humira, right? They're injectables. They're really good medicine. They work really well. I know Eric's a pharmacist, so he could tell you, but they're expensive. And that is what manufacturers have realized, is the market is ripe for continued specialty pharmaceutical development. And what that's done is they've gone from 10 to 20% of total spend to about 50 to 60% of total spend. And all the while, none of the other spend is going down, right? So it's just eating up more of the pie. And you really need to be able to manage those costs and understand all of the options available to you. And that's what we do. Even if we don't agree with some of the options, that's what a good consultant advisor does, is they say, these options exist. Here's the pros and cons. Do you want to entertain them or not? What we find a lot in the industry is specialty pharmaceuticals are very profitable for the, I guess, egregious PBMs. So they're not going to bring everything to the table that's going to mitigate that spend because of their misaligned incentive, which is the more costs go up, the more they get paid. So we could spend a whole nother webinar on misaligned incentives and why that's, not ideal in our current system. But hopefully that gives you some ideas on, really pressing hard. Are these the only options we have with specialty? Are there more out there? Would be the questions I would ask. And 9 and 10 kind of go together. And this, again, this is kind of what got me into the business is, does our formulary include brand drugs that are driving rebates, but aren't necessarily the lowest net cost? We see time and time again that formularies include brand name medicines with generic alternatives that, the generic might be $20, but the brand is $100 with a $50 rebate. Well, I don't want the $100 drug with a $50 rebate because the net cost is $50. I would rather have the generic alternative that's $20. And you would think that would be common sense, but when you have the misalignment of incentives that exist in the PBM world, and the story that I told you earlier about formularies, the formularies aren't developed to really mitigate costs. They're developed to drive more profit through rebates. And again, this isn't all PBMs. There are good PBMs that exist that do business the right way, but this is 80% of the market that's dominated by this type of business model. And then the last question, what's interesting as I've watched the industry evolve is everybody started to realize, or they got on webinars like this and went, man, rebates are a thing. I need to ask for all of them. Well, if I came to, one of the larger PBMs and said, I really want all my rebates, that's all well and good, but they're not just going to give up the revenue that they've been receiving. So what they did is they kind of just requalified what a rebate is. Said, yeah, we'll give you a rebate, and then we'll define a rebate as X, Y, and Z. Well, what that did is it just kind of took people's eye off the ball, made them feel good. Yes, I'm getting all my rebates. Well, definitions in a PBM contract are the most important definitions in any contract I think you'll ever sign, in the sense that a rebate might say, a rebate is only what we receive directly from pharma for X, Y, and Z, but manufacturer admin fees, clinical program fees, you name it, are not included as a rebate. And that's just their way of kind of hiding that, yeah, we'll give you all your rebates, but we've redefined what a rebate is. So we're still making a lot of money that isn't really benefiting you as the client. So that is the final question. I think we've got some time for one more poll question potentially, and questions.
Thanks, Trevor. So it looks like our poll questions are done, but we do have some questions coming in from the audience. There's a question about, what type of information do I need to review my PBM's performance, and how long does the analysis take?
Yeah, the information that you need to review your PBM's performance. So it's kind of twofold, right? The first evaluation that can be done really easily is cost per member per month. What did you spend? How many total members do you have covered? And what is that looking like? If it's over $100, that's a good indication that there's opportunity there. The other thing is, if you're wanting like an in-depth analysis, we turn around in-depth analyses in about 2 weeks. So it's a 12-month claim file. It's your most recent rebates and your PBM contract. Those are the 3 things that we typically need to do what we call a SWOT assessment. So we'll show you what your strengths are in your program, what your weaknesses are, opportunities, threats. And yeah, that's about a 10-day process.
Okay, perfect. Did you want to go through the example of the opportunity that you found in one of your case studies?
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have that? Yeah, if you could pull that up really quick, Deanna, that'd be great. I think sometimes, we talk about numbers and we talk about what we do, and it's a lot easier to visualize it. At least for me, I'm a super visual person. So this is what we mean by 9 times out of 10, we find that what the PBM has contracted at is not what's actually happening at the claim level. And what you can see here is really just the basic channels that medications can flow into, what the contract was, and then when we ran the claims through, how they actually performed. And you can see here, there was over $100,000 where this PBM was making, this is substantial profit. So over 6 figures on not all that large of a client either, where they were missing their guarantees, but they don't volunteer these up. They don't say, hey, we're reconciling ourselves, or we're going to send it to, an independent consultant like me to reconcile. You have to ask for it. You have to do the work. You have to put in the time. But we found time and time again that it's worth a lot. So this is just a quick visual of the basics that we do, taking in thousands of lines of prescription data and checking it against the contract. The other thing we've seen with fully insured transitions, we've got a great case study with the Connor team of about 71 employees that when we looked at the fully insured program, just on the pharmacy side, there was over $50,000 in opportunity between rebates, between some, not non-disruptive kind of manufacturer offsets, and then some more aggressive opportunities. So that equated to about $700 per person. So think about if you could just hand your employees, even if it wasn't a bonus of $700, but if you could say, hey, we're putting $500 into an HSA for you this year because we've saved so much on our pharmacy program. Those are the things that really keep us going, because again, we're not saving them that money. We're just giving them the money that they've always, been entitled to, but just didn't know the questions to ask to get it. So that's pretty cool. I look forward to kind of seeing how that all pans out, because it was early on this year. We did those projections, but we're pretty conservative, and we see those come to fruition all the time.
We have a question regarding this example, Trevor. What % of expense is the total opportunity for savings?
Yeah, so what we find is if you look at prescriptions as a percentage of the total healthcare dollar, it used to be 5-6%. People didn't pay a lot of attention to it. Well, with the explosion of specialty, it's not a matter of if or when specialty medications are going to hit your plan. It's a matter of they already are, and they're going to continue to get more and more higher costs, more indicators. The specialty pipeline is filled. That's where pharma is focusing. So that's a long way of saying it's not all about the immediate opportunity. It's about risk and cost mitigation going forward. Right now, 25% of the healthcare dollar goes to pharmaceuticals. And of that, we often see a minimum of 10% on a prescription, just review. And a lot of times we'll guarantee that we'll find 10%, but we found upwards of 40 to 50%, and that's not uncommon. It's relative to how poor your current program is. So if you've got an okay program, it might be in the 20%. If you haven't checked your PBM for 5 years, that's when we start finding 30, 40, 50% net cost reduction opportunities.
And with regards to that, Trevor, I think a lot of the times when we meet with employers, there's always the question of the crawl, walk, run approach. So what are some approaches that you consider are, kind of in the low risk, low reward type of level, and then higher risk, higher reward? Can you walk us through that? Yeah,
so the first thing you can do, typically, depending on who your third-party administrator is or carrier, is carve out your pharmacy benefit program. So go from maybe a carrier-owned PBM or a publicly traded PBM to an independent net cost focused PBM like TrueRx, the sponsor of this webinar. With that, I think people are scared of that. They're like, oh my gosh, how can that work? Is it going to be disruptive? And really what we see is it's basically the same medications at the same pharmacies. You just pay 10% less. And, we've done over 100 PBM transitions, so we're pretty good at working through that process and making sure that your patients don't experience a ton of disruption, because pharmacy is disruptive, right? When pharmacy is not working, it hits people right at point of sale. We take a lot of pride in that. It's not always about, saving the most amount of money. It's making sure people can get the medicine when they need it and how they need it. So that is, I think, probably the biggest thing as far as like low intervention, low effort, but there's probably 10, 15, 20% opportunity there, depending on, relatively your current program and how that's set up. Then you kind of move down the different levers or interventions that you can do. So right now there's copay maximization programs, which in short basically maximizes the amount of manufacturer money that's available to offset the patient's cost and the plan's cost. That usually brings another 5% in total cost reduction. And it's also not very, the intervention is kind of seamless to the patient when it's done right. So they save, the plan saves, it's a win-win. The more aggressive levers that you can start looking at that definitely have some education around them, some pros, some cons, but you need to be aware of. But also, to your point, Deanna, they're kind of higher intervention, higher opportunity for net cost reduction is importation. So, getting the high cost brand medicines and specialty from international pharmacies. So that scares a lot of people sometimes, but it's the same manufacturers. So, and we also aren't sourcing them from countries that aren't trusted and aren't well vetted. There's actually some countries that have a more stringent kind of approval process than we do here in America. So we found that as an option. It's not something that we push and say you need to do this or make it mandatory, but we find time and time again that there are certain medicines out there. Stelara is a great example. If someone gets put on Stelara, it's going to be $20,000 to $25,000. We can source that for our employer clients for about $7,500. So even if you're getting a 50% rebate, and that assumes you're getting all the rebate on Stelara, you're still paying $12,000, $13,000, and we can source that for $7,500. Same manufacturer, gets shipped right to your home, and patients like it because they usually get a copay waiver from it, and they're getting the same medicine they would have got otherwise. And then the last one is really something that continues to evolve really rapidly, which is kind of finding alternative funding or sources of funding for specialty medications. So the large manufacturers set aside money every year for patient assistance programs. And what some plans can do, and you can kind of address it in two different ways, is you can exclude specialty medications altogether and then have a partner that helps them find those manufacturer programs that they can use. And we've seen that successfully work, where you completely take off specialty pharmaceuticals from the plan. It's a very volatile market right now. Manufacturers are starting to push back. We've always said, even though it's a solution today, it might not be a solution tomorrow, but some plans are in a place where they don't have any choice. They're going to have to eliminate their plan if they don't do something more drastic. So that's when we're talking about, here's what the plan looks like. Here's the pros, the cons. Here's what we see in the crystal ball in the next year. And we'll continue to monitor and measure it. So that's one. And then the other, probably the most aggressive, is exclude specialty altogether, and, kind of say, it can never come back on the plan. It is, this is just our coverage. And if you need a specialty medicine and you need different coverage, then, look at alternative options to get coverage, such as the exchange or a spouse's plan or something like that. So again, this isn't, we don't recommend these right out the gate, but to your point, Deanna, the crawl approach is, let's just get you into a net cost focused PBM program, so you're getting the best deal possible without any real intervention or disruption. And then from there, you can start looking at, okay, what if we jogged a little bit and we tried some of these other things on a one-off basis, like importation? And if we wanted to run into the most aggressive program, we could look at really aggressive specialty cost containment programs. I think what we find, especially with the Connor team, is there's no right fit for every employer, right? So you go in and say, here's the different options, and which ones work best for you. And here's the pros and cons with all of them. Where a lot of advisors will not go down to that level because maybe they don't philosophically believe that it should be done, or there's some financial misalignment in, it'll impact their compensation. So it's just kind of aligning the incentives and saying, here's the options, and being educated on what they are.
Thanks, Trevor. That is very helpful. And that actually generated a lot of questions coming in. So we have a few minutes to answer a few more. I do have somebody asking for a copy of the presentation with the top 10 questions. So yes, we can definitely follow up with that. Our presentation is being recorded, so we will have a YouTube link available that we can follow up with. And then for the top 10 questions, we also have a one-pager that summarizes that. So we will definitely make sure to send you that. One of the questions that came in regarding the carving out the PBM arrangement. So the question says, for a plan that has a carved in arrangement, so pharmacy and medical, but wants to move to carve out arrangement to partner with a more transparent PBM, how do you recommend evaluating a new medical carrier?
Talk to the Connor team. That's what they specialize in, is helping you find a new medical carrier, TPA. That's their wheelhouse. That is what they do. And they do it well. I mean, talk to any of their clients. So that's probably the best way, because those are definitely considerations, right? You can't just say, hey, large carrier, I'm going to carve out my PBM. They're going to say either no, you can't, or it's going to cost you this to do it. So that makes the decisions and the approach a little bit better. But I've seen some of the Connor, analyses and kind of here's what we see today and here's the step-by-step, and that's their wheelhouse. That's what they do really well. And we just come in and support them on the pharmacy side.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, just to add a little bit to that, there's so many different variables that you got to consider of what makes sense, where are your employees at geographically, and what options are available within the area that you're in. And, does your current arrangement allow to just look at the pharmacy as a carved out option so you can continue the medical with who you have? So completely agree with you, Trevor. It's kind of a conversation that involves several factors to be considered, and we'll make sure that we provide our expert input into that, and based on what our experience has been.
Absolutely.
Pretty interesting question here. Have you evaluated the direct generic models like Cuban, so like Mark Cuban's?
Yes, and I would say that we get asked about Cuban and the direct generic models a lot. And I would say anything that's kind of shining a light and attempting to be more transparent in this industry, we applaud. Although there is issues with generic pricing in the commercial market, generics aren't blowing up health plans. Generics are not, most folks that are on a generic, it's inexpensive enough that they can take it. It's really those brand and specialty meds that are going to impact your plan heavily. That doesn't mean we jump over the generics and just say, yeah, we don't care about them. But we found that what most people don't know is, so Cuban is kind of like another pharmacy option. You can get different prices at different pharmacies in your own network. So if you're going to CVS or Walgreens, you're probably getting the highest cost generic available. Where if you went to maybe an independent pharmacy or a Walmart or something like that, for the same exact medicine, you're going to get a lower price likely. So that's what we help to educate too, is Cuban's done a good job shining a light, but even his generic prices aren't the lowest you can get. They're just more transparent. You can see them and you don't get surprised when you order them. So yeah, we're definitely following that. I think, as I mentioned, we had a pharmacy when I was in my TPA career, and it was a cost plus pharmacy, and it was, created in 2009. So, unfortunately, it wasn't created by Mark Cuban, so we didn't have the reach and the education, but it served a purpose. It served a purpose in that time and market to eliminate kind of the craziness that happens with generic pricing. But we're going to continue to evaluate them. There's another one called Scriptco out of Texas. They've got a really interesting kind of membership model, and their prices we found are even lower than Cuban's. So we find a lot of those to be, again, is this a right fit for a client? Let's talk about it. Let's talk about the numbers. That was a long answer to say, yes, we're aware of it. We continue to get asked about it. And we see a lot of PBM partners that we have that are starting to partner with Mark Cuban and his program.
Awesome. We got time for one more question here. Do you foresee federal legislation coming into play for situations like you just described with Stelara or with specialty meds in general?
I see any federal I always say, if the feds could fix this whole mess, I would go find something else to do. I would be happy. I would sleep well knowing that everybody can afford their medicine and we fix the problem. The problem is the lobby on the Hill with pharma. They spent, I want to say in 21, they spent $357 million in lobbying dollars. So with that, and that was double the next highest lobbying figures. So that tells me that the feds, because pharma funds their elections, we're really going to be in a tough place. Even if something gets passed, it's sort of like, how watered down is it going to be by the time we dig into it? So will it come into play? Has it already come to play? Is there a lot of importation news out there? Absolutely. And there's also bad actors out there that aren't doing the importation program right. So that's part of our job, is find the good ones, still educate on the pros and cons, legalities or illegalities of what's happening, and make sure that you can make educated decisions. And at some point you look at, two things, right? What's the risk and what's the dollar amount to achieve that? And you get to make a business decision just like you would on anything else, right? Anything else in your business, you're going to look at the risk and the financial components of it and go, yeah, we're willing to do that or we're not. And that's what we like to do, is just open that up to here's all the solutions in the market. We think maybe these 2 or 3 might be good for you, but it's your decision.
All right. Well, thanks, Trevor. I think, some of the takeaways that I heard, some big things for people to take away is contract review. So especially using, I took away using data that's independent of what your PBM has, to give you that more holistic view, as well as not just what that PBM wants you to see. And then really ensuring that you have that strong contract and that it's enforced, so that, like you had mentioned in your questions, that whatever projections you're receiving, they come to fruition. So having that strong contract and forcing it. And then obviously we've been talking a lot about transparent PBMs. So in tandem with your contract, that PBM contract, you need to have that pharmacy benefit manager that's eliminating the waste, that is looking at the formulary that you mentioned, even going back to kind of the generics we talked in one of the questions, right? Making sure our formulary doesn't have those really expensive brand name medications, and just supplementing or making you feel warm and fuzzy with rebates. And then, really, how do we work with that PBM to provide lower cost medications for members, and partnering with the right people? I think, in our experience at Connor, partnering with you guys and TrueRx, along with a few other partners, have been so successful for our customers, but not just on the financial side for, the employers, but it's the employees. We see so much success in managing this confusing insurance industry, especially when it comes to pharmacy for employees. So I think there's so much content here and so much to think about, that we really appreciate you sharing all of your expertise and knowledge today. As Deanna mentioned, we'll send that 1-pager wrap up. And then make sure that you are registered for our session 3, which is coming up on May 17th. We're going to talk about lessons shared from employers who have taken control of their healthcare spend, one strategy at a time. So actually get to hear from actual customers and employers that have done some of these strategies we've talked about over the past few months, and really see how it's impacted their business, their employees, and then ways that you can implement those into your own programs. So with that, we really thank you guys for joining today. We hope to see you on May 17th, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
Take care.